Hello everyone and welcome back to MVP. I'm your host Vaughan, and today we're going to be talking about practice sessions. Now, most guitarists don't have a motivation problem. They have a structure problem. They sit down, they pick up the guitar, they play a few things they already know, they noodle about. Maybe they try something difficult for a little bit, but then they get tired, bored or frustrated and then they end up stopping. So they practiced, but not much really changed. And that's probably not because of their motivation, but because they simply don't know how to practice. The issue isn't effort. It doesn't mean that improvement comes from just playing more. It comes from practicing right things, practice them in the right order. So let's talk a little bit about consistency versus intensity. One of the biggest myths is that breakthroughs and prodigies come from these 10-hour-long practice sessions every single day. In reality, most long-term goals that you're looking to achieve come from short, consistent sessions practicing the right things. Your brain adapts to repeated exposure over time. A focused 20 minutes every day will almost always outperform a 3-hour practice session. Not because you're doing more, because that is not the answer, but because you're giving your nervous system frequent updates and information on what to do. Consistency keeps these skills alive and builds them more and more. When intensity done wrong, just builds fatigue, and also can be very, very draining. So next, let's talk about variability. When you're learning something new, your goal shouldn't be speed. It's consistency, but in another sense. Every time you play a passage, it's going to be slightly different. That's human. But your brain usually has to guess which version is correct, and that can slow learning down. When your repetitions are consistent, your brain can lock onto the pattern much faster, and it can code it way more reliably. That's why clean, repeatable reps matter. You're not trying to prove that you can play it once. You're trying to make it inevitable that you're going to be able to do it every single time. My teachers always say, don't practice until you get it perfect. Practice until you can't get it not perfect. I don't know how much sense that makes, but take that as you will. So, there are 3 layers to every effective practice session. First, you want to reinforce what you already know. This keeps your technique and your playing stable and prevents you from regressing. Second, work on something slightly beyond your capabilities. This is where the most amount of growth occurs, because you're adapting to be better in terms of speed or rhythm or cleanness or whatever you're looking for to play. Thirdly, end with something fun, something creative, like improvising. So your brain kind of takes that as the reward for you doing a good job practicing your technique. And also, if you've learnt a new technique, you can incorporate it into your playing. Skipping some of these layers can lead to things like frustration and stagnation in your playing, which are not fun, and that's not why we play the instrument that we do. Okay, so now we know the 3 layers of what we want to do, let's talk a little about warm-ups. Warm-ups are not about pushing the limits. If I ask you to warm up for a race, you're not going to sprint 100 yards. Warm-ups are about aligning your brain and your hands, because they're 2 separate things, if you didn't know already. If your warm-ups make you tired, that's not a warm-up. Things like simple movements, slow tempos, things like relaxed playing are enough to boot up your nervous system and get it online. And that also reduces a lot of injury risk, something I talked about in my second to most recent video. But anyways, I talked about different techniques that you can learn and practice WOD in your sessions. But anyways, we should always focus on one thing during our practice sessions. Guitar, for example, you can do so many different things in a practice session that it usually gets really daunting and we end up just not playing. But focusing on just one thing each time makes it so much simpler. And plus, trying to fix everything at once isn't going to work. The brain works best when it knows exactly what it needs to prove. Maybe one day you're focusing on picking consistency. Let that day be about that. If it's about timing, don't worry about certain things like how fast you can play. If you're looking at note clarity, don't focus on how impressive something sounds, because that can be a whole separate day to itself. And remember, you're doing music. You're probably not going to be doing this for the next 20 minutes. If music is something that your entire life is around, then going through something every day is not wasting any time, because you're going to be doing it for so long. That's why I always talk about music theory. Learning music theory may take a month or something. But remember, that's just a month in so much longer you're going to be playing for. And clear goals create progress. And clear goals create faster progress. Especially much better progress than ambiguous goals. So, why does timing need its own attention? Timing is often seen as a side effect of having good technique. But the thing is, it's a skill of its own. Playing in time consistently requires your brain to predict and not react. That means timing improves when you simplify your playing enough to focus on rhythmic accuracy. And practicing with a metronome isn't meant to be robotic. It's about building trust between your internal sense of time and your hands. And hitting a plateau doesn't mean that you're stuck. It probably means that your current skill set has stabilized. Before something improves, it has to become consistent first. And yes, hitting a plateau can be incredibly boring, because no dramatic change is happening. But it's necessary. And a lot of players quit or change direction just before they reach what they need to. You know that meme with a guy where he's mining and he's just about to reach diamonds? Kinda like that. But if you want to focus more on plateauing, I've got an entire video talking about that. And just for you, I've linked it right there. Anyways, let's talk about ending sessions. Ending a practice session without a sense of progress can be so demotivating. That's why sessions should be designed to include at least one win, whether that's small or big. And remember, that win doesn't have to be speed. It could be cleaner notes, better timing, or even just a section of the song feeling way more reliable than it used to. Progress you can actually feel and see will make you want to come back tomorrow and do it again. And a good way of doing this is writing down what you've achieved throughout the day. It might sound silly writing a diary, but it can actually help a lot of people. If you want to learn more about stuff like that, I've got an entire video on dopamine talking about it too. All the self-promotion in this video. But anyways, I digress. But anyways, back to consistency. Consistency is more like an identity than it is a schedule, if that makes any sense. Most consistent players aren't disciplined machines. They're people who see practice as being a part of who they are. They don't wait for motivation. They show up because it's just a normal part of life. It's a habit. Even on bad days, they just get it done. Consistency isn't about forcing yourself. It's about removing the decision of whether I should do that or not. Because say guitar is your entire personality, you're not going to think, oh, should I go play guitar? You're just going to do it. Because that is you. But anyways, if your practice feels unfocused, the solution probably isn't more effort. It's having a better structure to what you're actually practicing. Progress comes from doing the right things often, not doing everything all at once. When your sessions are consistent, intentional, and realistic, improvement stops seeming so far away. And you don't need practice perfect. You don't need perfect practice. You need repeatable practice. So always remember, a bird in the hand is worth the exact same in a bush. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.